Hey everybody. Before I continue with the discussion, let me do my disclaimer. This is mainly about Jediism, its growth, and it does not recognize any sect denomination, political party, sexual identification, color, or other practices. This is neutral ground. And if you by chance have the privilege to join us and would like the value of what you gain from this, and push other agendas and ideologies, you will be warned once to leave. If that is not abided by, you will be therefore blocked out, shut out, and probably never be asked to come back unless you can abide and agree to it. And with that being said, we shall continue with our discussion. So what I think when we have our hobbies, things that we like, I think it does in a way lend itself to Jediism because we set up, we kind of set, we get focused on it, we enjoy it, right? And part of Jediism is actually we finding things we enjoy, right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I don't know where else I was going with that tone of voice.
This break, I think, has been kind of nice, to be honest with you. It's given us kind of like a step back. Uh, yeah, I think when we enjoy something, we we find there are ways that it teaches us things, right?
Yeah, and before there was another podcast that you talked about like hobbies helping with spiritual well-being. I think it was with value of enrichment and wealth, to be exact.
It was, yeah, I think it was something to do with that. I'd have to go back and look back through the archives here, but you know it's like with you and bonsai. Yeah, matter of fact, we did talk about that because we talked about the bonsai tree.
We had a whole separate podcast on that one.
Oh yeah, I know. See, it's cool, but see, in a way, when we're enjoying our hobbies, that takes us through a gamut of the range of expectations, hopes, and disappointments, right?
I'm not sure if I've been disappointed with bonsai. I think it's like something that it's like I'm always wanting more to work on with it, and things don't always go the way that it's intended, but the whole point of it is to consistently be working on it.
Right. Right. And see, for me, one of my hobbies is what's known as remote control rock crawling. And I'll kind of give you those of you who don't know what that is that it's in the remote control hobby world where you build or you buy it and then you alter and build and upgrade the parts on it to suit it more to become better, more capable of going up and over rocks and surfaces that in to be quite honest here is that are basically defying physics and logic and gravity to a point. And I'll kind of give you an idea that And I suggest watching videos. That way you kind of get a better idea. But you have a face of something that is basically, you see, 90 degrees is just right at straight up, right? Directly straight up vertical. That depending on the wheelbase length and the other mechanisms in it, is that one can basically go up to about 78 degrees straight up. And then if it's kept balanced enough without rolling on its lid, can actually get over it or get up it, provided traction's good and you have it set up for to mainly be that way. But there's other things that can aid in that happening. Like, for example, I'm going to go on a little tirade here, is that the dig unit locks the rear wheels, but allows the front wheels to turn. And so you're anchoring, you're basically in a way having an anchor you're dragging by the rear wheels because they're dragging. So they're making the front stay connected because it's pulling the front down as it's dragging the rear tires. So that allows it to actually go up steep inclines and get what's known as a hook on something where one of the front tires can actually get over the breakover point up top and then therefore pull the rest of the vehicle up. So some people call it cheating, others call it just an aid, depending on your philosophy and your perspective of this. I call it either way, depending, because if a guy's got one and we're out and he ends up flipping a switch, and then you go, wait a minute, wait, you son of a bitch, you've got dig on that thing. And we're busting our ass trying to get up something, trying to get our rigs to make it up somehow, and this guy ends up cleaning it. And you're like, but very cool at the same time. And I think with that stuff, it's where there's an unpredictability. So you're adapting to the situation by the tools you have. And Jediism, in a way, has that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so rock crawling, I think, in motion or in action and application, kind of puts a Taoist aspect into Jediism. And in that, correct? And how one must remain flexible.
Okay.
The adaptability.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think for me, rock crawling applies itself. And plus, rock crawling is a slow moving thing. So there is an intense focus. So you're kind of shutting everything else out around it because you're having to focus on the rig to be able to maneuver it and manipulate it up or around without flipping it over. That's the goal, is for it to not roll and all four wheels, well, minimum of 3 at best, in a precarious situation with it, without the vehicle flipping on its lid or rolling off. So there has to be time to work with it and build it and make it more capable. So that's where I think, for me, rock crawling sets up that lesson to learn, because it's not going to be able to do everything but it will do it all very well and excel in some areas, which we all do, because none of us are going to excel at everything. We're going to have our areas of expertise.
We're going to have our disappointments in some things. And
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes that comes from setting our expectations too high,
Right.
or holding on to them too tightly, and not allowing for change to come in ways that it is going to happen, and trying to take control in that.
Right, right. And that's the thing, is that, and I'm going to kind of refer back to this one rig, because how this one started, it started and went through an evolution. Okay. Much like we do when we start going and going down this path. All right. And granted, there are several avenues that one goes down this, and some say, no, that doesn't exist, or no, I disagree with that philosophy. However, a question I have with that, is it because it's a discipline that you're not comfortable with, or is it just something that doesn't appeal to your character? Okay. So, and instead of judging it, how about letting it be what it is and accepting that way as it is for that person?
We
Okay.
want to grab hold of things, consistencies, things like that. And sometimes we're projecting those consistencies on the future. We want things to be as expected, how we're expecting them to be, and continue to be that way. But life, it's not always going to go our way.
Right, right, right. And see, and I'm going to use this rig as my premise for my topic as I do this, because it seems to be how I can kind of really have a teachable moment. Okay, it's easier for me. And that this rig started out as something that was totally designed for a different purpose, what they call a rock bouncer. Okay, where you go over rough areas very quickly and the rig bounces around. So the suspension and the chassis and all that was set up for a bunch of that movement. Okay, where articulation and slow movement was not its forte. But and when I had got into rock crawling in the RC world, is that I took this rig and over time changed it. So it evolved. And I had gotten it to such a point that it was what we call eating itself. And it was very inconsistent. But when it worked brilliantly, but for a very short time. I could go out with some guys and have a couple of sessions. And in those 2 sessions, it worked brilliantly. Or I go out on another session and I could be in it out there for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, or an hour, and then invariably something on it would just self-destruct. And then what happened is a friend of mine that I go out with said, hey, why don't you bring it by? And I have a thought about something, basically. I'm like, okay, so I brought it by. He's like, look, and we went over And I said, look, I've got a chassis here that I'm not using anymore. Why don't, let's transfer the parts. Oh, okay. So it evolved from having all the mechanical parts from that other, which really were not ideal for rock crawling. The axle center differentials, the pumpkins is what they call it, were too big. And so it drug on rocks, because one of the things about rock crawling is you got to get the center of gravity lower to the ground. So that means altering the chassis to drop everything lower, but still have ground clearance, right? To where it can get over rocks. That's tire size or clearance and learning how to drive it to get around and over stuff and to clean it, which means get over the obstacle. Well, ended up that as durable as those differentials and axles were, and you always push the rig to the point of it's going to make it, or it's going to have a point of failure. Because if you think about it, everything and everyone has their breaking point. So you prepare and build yourself to help tolerate that moment, or to be able to adapt better to it. And see the relationship here? So over the time, Smoking Duck, and I'll go into where the name came from in a moment, is...
Did it get chased by a duck?
No, it's though that would be funny. That would be funny though. That it evolved into something completely different. And I still try to keep an element of its original beginnings and roots in it some way. Like I've got a cage that I've been working on that's gone through some transformations on its own in order to take weight out of it, so it isn't so top heavy. But so I've had to adapt something, which is part of what Jediism is, learning how to adapt. Okay. So over time, I was at a swap meet for RC stuff, and this guy shows up, says, "Hey, I've got these 4 chassis here. Anybody want them?" I said, "Well, is one in there for this?" And he's like, "Well, I think so." All right, okay, cool. And 2 of them were carbon fiber chassis, carbon fiber side rails. I'm like, nice. So I got $40, $50, $60, carbon fiber side rails for free. I'm like, all right. And so ended up that, again, I had to rebuild the thing. Again, the alchemy. And I had gone through many disappointments and hopes. So I had to accept that over time it was going in a vision of this is going to be one of those rigs that one day it's going to show up. And this picture in my head of what I want it to look like. And it's there over a 2-year span of changing parts and ended up putting it together correctly. Now, mind you, it got very expensive over the period of time. We're talking from a $300 start on this one thing, this one type of rig, ended up to evolving into something that I'm going to give a rough price tag on. And I'm not bragging when I say this, okay? I want that clear, to something that's probably around $1,200, give or take. So, but if we look at Jediism as the value and the value of things and what we learn and gain and experience, one could say that if we wanted to use a rock crawler, then eventually we're going to reach that point where we are going to be able to really show up and shine. And in some ways, we're just going to have to not always show up because we're not able to, or we're not in the place. So over the evolution of that rig, it ended up, and there's this thing called proven. It's proven. And in 2 sessions, it has stayed consistent and has cleaned everything that I have put it on, that is our normal testing playground and proving ground, which will break things. It will push a RC crawler to its limits and beyond them because of the angles, the surface, because it's always, the surface is never going to be consistent. There is a moment where the surface is consistent after a rain because it cleans the rocks. So you have excellent traction. It's perfect. But over time, dust, sediment, whatever, blows across the surfaces. So it changes the surface. So even though the rig is consistent, it's never going to act consistent. And this is where we can have moments where we will question ourselves, right?
Was the original topic about what was the original topic again? What was it?
Disappointment.
Disappointment. Was it about disappointment with expectation or disappointment with ourselves?
I think it's disappointment in how something goes not quite to how we think it's going to be, but we have to remain open to the changes.
I don't think that resolved the question.
Okay. Well, yes, it's about disappointment in a way. Okay. Because through evolution and change and evolving, our eyes get open to different things, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can look back at where we came from and go, yeah, I can see where I was disappointed, or I was very disappointing. So I had to change that element of myself. And because, let's say, for example, one was unreliable, they had to learn to become reliable and meet the expectations of others and themselves, because they knew they could do better, but they were lacking the motivation or the why, and wanting to stay comfortable because it was familiar. And granted, there are people that are more resistant by either nature, makeup, or their history or past, that reveal that to us when we sit down and we take a look at ourselves and we review and reflect. So disappointment comes from not able to reach, or we're not yet ready to reach that point, right? Or we haven't reached it because there's something we're lacking or unwilling or unable.
And there can also be disappointment in that.
Yes, because there has to be an expectation in everything we do, right? Because if you don't follow through with expectations in some way, that's a way for people to lose respect for you and for you to lose respect for yourself.
But if you're holding too tightly to that, then you have the issue with getting disappointed from it too.
Right, right. You can be so rigid in the expectations that you never actually give yourself that mercy, right?
It could be either with the person, like how they're viewing themselves and their rigidity, or how they're viewing the situation and their rigidity.
Yeah, exactly. If one is so rigid in everything, like we're talking mechanically, robotically, dogmatically rigid, then nothing is ever going to meet. There's no way. But then again, if we don't have enough of an expectation, we're going to still be disappointed or be disappointing. So there's this, and it goes along with compassion, right? In a way here. But yet, when one starts on something, you are in a way making a contract with yourself.
I think there was a conversation we had with Miles before on the topics of beliefs, and I think his statement would have still worked with this topic here, is that you have this expectation or this belief or this experience or this sense of how you're supposed to be, and
Right.
you hold loosely to that, because if you're holding really tightly to that, that's where the problems can happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And so disappointments come from things just not going the way we envisioned them. And what we believe or thought the way something should be. And believe something in the way something should be. Which, granted, there is a point where we have to not compromise that. We have to maintain and stick to that principle. We cannot substitute it for the sake of a word that's going around, it's been going around, for the sake of fairness. Okay. Now, there is a thing of being fair, but being fair has a tolerance to it. Being fair means that, okay, I will cut you this break, but however, under this condition, there cannot be fairness without a condition. Nothing is for free. And there are people that want things to be fair without the consequences, as they call equity.
I think there's a difference between what someone would call being nice and what someone would call being kind.
There is a vast difference, yes. Being nice is you allow things to take advantage of you. You don't have a spine. And we do that simply for basically for the fact of we want to be liked or we want to be accepted, and we don't want the confrontation, or we're too giving, which people can take advantage of and see that. Now, being kind is that you are fair, you are generous, you are compassionate, you're empathetic.
It allows for some sort of adversity to be there for the betterment of the individuals involved.
Yeah, but also being kind is there is a limit one is willing to go. And then when that limit is reached, it no longer, kindness can end.
So kindness is niceness with boundaries.
In a way, but don't confuse the two.
Of course not.
Yeah, don't confuse the two and substitute it. Okay? Because that also helps determine the relationship with yourself during that time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and so what I've learned in this hobby is, in a lot of ways, that. So, but we all have to go through changes, even though some of them we don't like, because there were times when of course, somebody helped me out with this. And there was a time the man was kind enough and generous enough to actually, in a way, sponsor me, because I was going through a rough time after my divorce. But the desire and the willingness to still show up and go out. But I still worked at it as hard as I could. My motivation and desire and passion and enthusiasm for this hobby, I would not waver. And I still don't. And there's a motivation to still get back out there because I still want, because there's challenges in it. And they're more mental. And there is some emotional roller coaster in this, believe it or not. Because you get excited and then, oh, well, that's going to be expensive. Or it's like, okay, I think I can handle this expensively, this expense. But if something, say, a part that costs you $200 and money's a bit tight, and that $200 part breaks, yeah, you're going to be out of the game for a little while until you can afford it. So there's that thing of where you've built this thing and it's doing really well. And then all of a sudden, that $200 part craters, which happens, over time, or you pushed it that hard. And of course, we have to push ourselves sometimes that hard to failure. If not, nothing gets built, nothing builds, nothing gets appreciated. So with disappointment, there's appreciation of it. Without disappointment, there can't be appreciation. And without appreciation, there can't be disappointment. So disappointment in a way is like, and it's not failure, okay? It's not a failure. It's things, whatever it is, just did not go quite accordingly to how we envisioned and see them unfolding. And it's always good to have that positive look. You had that positive, that positive motivation, that positive attitude with things. But, and so with this and this rock crawling thing, eventually Smoking Duck changed name, which it's still in its AKA Smoking Duck, or now also AKA Ectostein, because of the chassis that everything got moved over to from this company called Element, which irony out in the elements and the elements of it, I guess, may be their premise of their name of their company, ended up refining and getting streamlined a bit in its parts to having two different brands of parts put in it. Wait a minute. Well, it did go back to part of its roots in this. I just realized something. No, wait. No, okay, no, I was thinking of something else. But yes, it did kind of go back to its roots in one area. Was the transmission in it. It went back to its original style of transmission in the gearing in it and the mechanical parts used in it. But I changed it it got changed from being more upright to laying down lower to a different style of case to drop the center of gravity. But where the name Smoking Duck came from was that I was out when I was learning this.
Didn't you say it caught fire?
It did. What happened is the electronics in it, what we call a ESC or an electronic speed controller, because how it was geared was drawing too many amps and it was overloading that speed controller. And basically it was overheating. And there's this thing that happens that we call the blue spirit, or basically it's blue smoke that comes from an electronic part like a motor or a speed controller. So while I was out with a group of guys, it started to act funny, like it had lost its mind, right? It started to jump around and roll back and forth, just intermittently and very jerking, right? It was having a convulsion, or it was having a seizure or something. And then all of a sudden, it started bellowing smoke out from under the body, and ended up, without me doing, even making it do it, ended up launching itself off into a pond of water. And electronic and water, not always a great idea. So I had this moment, and I reached in and grabbed it. And when I pulled it back out of the water, it was still smoking. So then it was from that day forward dubbed Smoking Duck. So the unpredictability of that, and where I had thought I had solved a problem of that amp drawage, and it was doing good all day. And this was in its early stages of the learning for me and it. And I'm like, great, I think I've got it solved. Well, at that moment, no. I had been shown differently that no, basically it said, you know what, I'm done with this. I cannot do this anymore, and protested and launched itself into a pond of water, a pool of water that was about 2 feet deep.
I think that's like the second instance of you mentioning that a device that was under your care had caught fire.
Yes, yes. So it said, you know what? I'm ending it here. I can't take it anymore. And basically, I'm going to jump off a building, you know, and it ended up going into the water. And fortunately, stuff like this, on something like that, I was trying to stay within a budget of affordability, a tight budget. Well, I ended up, I had to like expand my range of output on cost on things. So to where I wouldn't have that problem anymore. And so adaptability, change. And then I no longer had that problem. But of course, with that, you know, other expenses get made because it started doing this and become very reliable. But however, you have to make changes to other things in order to keep it working in unison, and the relationship and the synergy of it to make it still work. So the teaching moment that I learned from this was that there's always going to be change. It's that universal truth we've talked about.
Yep.
The universe is ever changing. And we have to learn how to be able to change with it, whether it be our ideals, our expectations in a way, to a point, or how we are with ourselves, the way we are with ourselves, the way we treat ourselves and others, or maybe we have to become to a point of changing our whole reality to actually what the truth of the matter is. And what I got from it was that I was trying to make a small dog get out in the yard with big dogs. and trying to have a dog in a fight, trying to have a dog in the fight. Well, in order to have a dog in a fight, that dog's got to be able to fight. It's got to be able to stick with it, right? It's got to be able to hang with it. It's got to be able to deal with it. Well, which thus the evolution of Eckstein, Smoking Duck, now is that vision of where I wanted it to be. And it's still got a couple more changes, but it's basically still going to be in its same form, but there's one more change that's going to happen to it. That's going to make it even more capable. And it's going to push it even harder. But it will be set up. It will be ready for the challenge. And I look forward to that. That's with patience. In time. But however, I look forward to it because in everything we have, with bonsais, you were saying at one time that there's a competition that happens, right? That you go and you sign up for, right?
There's a competition coming up, and actually I'm supposed to take the plants over there on Thursday.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah.
So you've done well with one of those before, right?
I won first place 2 years in a row with the same bonsai.
So now let me ask you this. You've put a lot of care and time and work into that bonsai, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What would happen instead of it winning, it actually not even place?
I don't think it's ever not even place. I mean, it's gotten second for 2 years.
Right.
But and it's gotten a third before, but it hadn't ever not placed.
But what if it were to not place?
Then I have other plants that I'm entering that might.
Okay, but wouldn't there be a disappointment in that?
I'm not doing it specifically for the competition.
No, but wouldn't there be a disappointment in that? That this winning plant ended up not even getting a second thought.
With the plants I got?
Well, but hypothetically, which it can happen, right?
Hypothetically, but come on.
Well, okay. Okay, let me give an example here. All right. And this is from an experience we had. And we give each other a hard time about when we have people from different groups join in that come out to where we go, because really and truly where we go is like the place around here where I live. It is got everything one could ever hope for trail driving, which is there are obstacles, but they're not as extreme, which you have to have a capable rig. Or you can go to one area where you can be at one area where it is as extreme on the rock crawling as you can get for this scale. Okay, we're talking 1/10 scale of 1-to-1. Okay, and so, but we have to adapt our rigs to the environment, to the situation, or try to drive in the situation, try to drive it through the situation or what there is in front of it. So that's what we call a capable rig. And so to where the story goes is some guys from a different group that live in a city that's about an hour and a half away from here showed up. And there's this one guy that has a pretty capable rig. Well, this one guy shows up with a rig that spanked and wiped the floor with us on our home ground. Just spanked us. And there was another couple of guys in there that just spanked us. We couldn't eat. We were like, I'm just going to pack up and go home. So in a sense, we were placing within the competition of ourselves and a lot of people, because we could normally get together and show up and all of us do very well because there's an inner competition between us. We'll do follow the leader at times. And so what it is that you get 2 tries. If your rig can't do it, you either do what's known as the hand of God, which is a fail, or you go to the back of the line because you're going to be holding everybody else up. And so you get upset, you get pissed off. It's like, well, damn. That's why I'm asking, what if it weren't able to place? Because there are unforeseen, unpredictable elements that do happen. But I think we all need to have that dose of humility given to us. You know, the other day, was it 2 weeks ago, I went out to this one place. It's in the city that's about an hour and a half away from here, where I went into this one indoor rock crawling place, and they were doing a competition, what we call a comp. And out in the wild, my rig does very well. Okay. And admittedly, I don't have a competition rig. It's more for the wild, which means that I have more leniency in positioning and flexibility as far as how I might do something. But in these rock crawling competitions, is they have these gates that you have to be able to make it through in as little extra and as few moves as possible. Well, the wheelbase, the turning radius, and all that, my rig was not suited for. But I showed up. I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll pay my fee and I'll go in and I'll do it just for the experience. And well, in that, I was looking at it and I'm going, wait a minute, my steering's off a bit. Well, what happened is what they call the toe. One wheel was pointed way out and the other was pointed kind of straight. So I'm going, oh, well, when you're on the start, you can't change that. You have to drive it as it is. So I would have done better, but my rig was not, I didn't look over it well enough for the preparation. And of course, I went in blind. Yes, I went in cold, but however, I still did it. I still did both sets of courses, and I didn't place, but the experience of it was, and it was a totally different surface. So there were a lot of things that were stacked against me, but the experience of going, well, I guess I need to stay more on top of the condition. Because if one of these things falls, rolls, whatever, it could take a hard hit and it can throw some things out of whack. It can throw some things out of alignment, which, you know, there's plastic on some of these things that you want failure points. So, yeah. And of course, I had finished building it and hadn't quite got it what they know as dialed in, gotten everything completely in alignment. So yeah, experience,
I think
lessons learned.
I think the last bonsai competition I entered into, I entered in one of my little boxwoods,
Yeah.
and it got second to a 2 foot long bonsai forest.
Oh, so somebody came in.
It was huge. It was
So
in a
somebody.
giant pot and it was just a forest.
So basically, somebody had changed the conditions, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it still goes back to what would be your thought on if you never even placed?
I don't think that's a chance this year.
Well, but that's still avoiding the question.
I wouldn't think much of it. I just try again next year.
Okay. So, and that's the thing is that if one doesn't imagine themselves ever losing, which is a good way to go. I mean, that is a very great attitude, right? To say, I am not going to lose. That sets us up for success in many ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a determination, a focus, which that is a very good quality, actually.
This
Because,
year I'm entering in 3 bonsai.
yeah, see, you're up
I,
in the
I
ante.
have I have I have the one that I've entered every year, which looks different every year. And then I have a new boxwood that's smaller that looks like it's been blown over by the wind.
Oh, see, yeah.
And then
So,
I have a 2 foot olive tree bonsai.
see, that's weird. That we all have this idea due to ignorance of what a bonsai traditionally is, right?
Most people would think it would be like a pine or a juniper, but really it's just a plant in a pot.
Yeah, which is what bonsai means.
Yeah, it means potted plant.
you know,
And it can be a tree, it could be a bush, it could be a vine. It's the act of how you're maintaining it.
yeah. So something that can be so mundane sounding end up to have a very elegant, beautiful name. So I guess in that, beauty is in a way the perception of, oh, it's just a plant in a pot or a potted plant to bonsai or bonsai, depending, your
It's
traditional.
a whole art.
Yes, it is an art form in itself, which I think bonsai, pardon my accent, because I just can't say anything right.
Well,
I pronounce
it's
it
pronounced bonsai.
bonsai, bone, bone,
Bonsai. And that's
bonsai.
that's the Japanese pronunciation. English speakers just totally mispronounce it
Oh,
into
oh yeah,
an
granted,
English
but
version of it, but it's bonsai.
bonsai. Okay, bonsai, bonsai,
Well, now you're saying
bonsai,
it correctly.
bonsai. So whatever. I'm not saying that as whatever as a discount, but it's kind of like, okay, I don't want to get hung up on this too much. But nice to know. Um, on the other side of it, with disappointment, is we have to undergo and experience disappointment. It teaches. It shows us where we need to improve, or maybe quit accepting excuses.
So we did go ahead with the planned
We
class.
did go ahead. It did not directly, but yes. And so, and yeah, it's funny how we can get to a discussion and end up still being a teachable in a lesson. So, and which is great. I love it. And in a way, I kind of prefer the discussion over just me ranting, but still having the floor in a way. And so, disappointment is one of those things that to keep ourselves from being disappointed is we have to state our expectations as well. And that goes with boundaries in order to meet our needs and to get our needs met. And so, in a way, you're looking at self-care in this too.
Weren't we talking about self-care with the first points made in this discussion?
In a way, yes. But directly as a result, if we are in a relationship with somebody, for example, and things are not going according to the way they need to go and need to be, then that conversation needs to happen. Or you have to maintain those things, those elements, those expectations in order to reduce, but yet still be able to remind somebody of, hey, when we first started this, we agreed to this, did we not? And I stated this, and you agreed. And I agreed to these things. And so we have to go back and revisit that, which reminds us and brings us to that point of humility where we're like, oh yeah, you're right, or you're correct. I have overstepped. I'm sorry I've disappointed you. And so we become disappointed in ourselves because we became relaxed, which happens. All right. We cannot be 100% all the time. It is, and even top level athletes cannot be 100% all the time. They're going to have a day where they're just not going to perform up to standard, right? They're going to have a day where they're just not going to be at that performance level that they know they can be. Okay, maybe they're just tired. Maybe they're a little sore, too sore. Or maybe they just have their mind not completely in the game and focused. Okay. And so from there is some disappointment in ourselves because they know they can achieve the same goals that, or maybe be able to go higher in that goal and they can reach it. But however, they have to figure out what it is. They have to look at it. Maybe they didn't push hard enough. Maybe they weren't warmed up enough. So there is care in this. Self-care. And maintaining the expectations is valid. And if people go, well, the expectations are too high, or those are unrealistic expectations, are they? Are they actually unrealistic? If they are realistic and one is just not willing to have the willingness to apply themselves to it, and that they might say it's unfair. Well, maybe somebody or something is just not able to meet those. Then, yes, we have to change our expectations and make allowances, which is fair. but you're still maintaining an expectation. You're still having allowances to a point. You're being kind. Like you were saying earlier, it's being nice with boundaries to a point. But being kind is also setting conditions. And people go, and it's stated, well, I don't like conditions. They are
Well, conditions can also be a part of boundaries.
exactly. But conditions is such a hard word. So is boundaries, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's a reminder. So we're kind of got with, so really and truly, this whole discussion is bouncing on and touching on different things that do add to disappointment, which lead to disappointment, which add to and build to disappointment, or to not be disappointed.
How many times have you said disappointed?
I don't know. It's one of those things that I we it is what it is. Okay. But and that's basically what this is over, is that. And I'm sure going back and listening, we're probably going to count it. Oh my God, you said it 100, you said it 300 times. Okay, oh wow. Okay, I'll work on that. Um, but everything in ways leads to it.
Wait, are we working on bringing the amount that you're saying up or toning it down more?
I'm becoming more mindful of it now. Thanks for pointing it out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was unaware until something got said, and I'm like, oh yeah, I am kind of going at this here a little bit hard on that. But so
Well,
yeah,
I mean, to be fair, it's like the topic of the class anyways, so I mean it's to be expected.
well, yeah, but maybe it's for those that are hard headed that just don't quite get it yet. How many times do you have to beat somebody in the head with a 2x4 before they finally get the idea? For those that are going to hear this, maybe you just hadn't quite figured it out yet. And that might be enough. Maybe you're getting hit in the head with that word enough times with that 2x4, and it finally sinks in for those that are stubborn that way or dense. Maybe you're thick head, but and it just takes getting kicked in the teeth a few times. However, though, I'm going to leave this thought, and it's been a while since I've done a leave you with a thought, is that each of us has that point of failure, which may lend to the excelling at some point. What would be wrong with pushing yourself to the point of failure and accepting that, knowing you may just actually fail, no matter what you do? I'm going to leave with that thought. Push yourself to the point of failure, and no matter what it may be, and fail, and accept the failure for what it is. With that, I leave with you. Everybody have a good day, a good night, and wherever you are, whatever time zone, whatever dimension you may be in, or universe. Have a good moment. Tal Griffin out. Thank you.